How are we, ladies and gentlemen? Another day of MCJ Report. Welcome to MCJ Report number 121. For everybody who is currently tuned in right now across Rumble and YouTube, I welcome you to the show. And if you are new here, you are watching MCJ Report, and I am your host, Morgan C. Jonas. I'd like to welcome everybody in the chat. I can see a lot of very familiar names. There's Sharon there. Thank you for being here. A lot of very familiar usernames, which I'm not going to try and pronounce. There's Hills there. There's Becky. It's great to have you guys on board. Why don't you go ahead and share the broadcast? If you're watching via Rumble on your mobile phone, I believe there is a share button in the bottom right-hand corner. It would be greatly appreciated if you could share it out to the groups, Facebook groups, Telegram groups, whatever networks you feel could benefit from this content. That'd be really great. We want to keep getting the word out there and telling the other side of the story, otherwise left untold by the mainstream media. That's right. So we've got an interesting show in store for this evening. Now, before I get started, I'm going to run through some headlines with you guys. These are topics that we won't be covering on the show today, but I feel that it's very telling. Just looking through the headlines on any daily basis is very much indicative of the times that we're living in. So I'm just going to shoot them off here. So we've got more than 40 Victoria police officers stood down for refusing the jab. ABC, Pfizer has power to silence governments and maximize profits. Now, we know this already. The interesting thing about a story like this is we have ABC stating the obvious, actually putting out for everybody to see, yet I believe this type of message will fall on deaf ears, because the next article will be praising the products of this corporation that they have proclaimed to have the capability to silence governments. WA won't reopen border to New South Wales and Victoria. That's to be expected. Mark McGowan is an absolute lunatic. He's also imposed a mandate to cover 75% of Western Australian workers. Now, we're starting to see some action from the mining industry in Western Australia, workers coming together and standing up against these mandates. I'll have more to say about that on the show really soon. We see that in New South Wales, supposedly there's new benefits for the fully vaccinated. So again, we're seeing the reinforcement of this two-tier society that so many of us never wanted to see. Vaccine certificates for international travel. Novak Djokovic won't be able to enter Australia unless he's vaccinated. So I tip my hat to this tennis legend for holding the line and sticking true to upholding his values and his bodily autonomy. So I think we can all applaud the superstar for doing that. Victoria Department of Health ordered to release documents used to justify lockdown. Well, I'd like to see documents used to justify everything and what type of debate and oversight there was, because my suspicion is that there was absolutely none. Mayor facing charges after criticising Queensland's vaccine rollout. That was from Sky News. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're entering the era of thought crimes, whereby certain people are investigated for expressing certain opinions. And that wraps it up for the headline. So hope that everybody is doing well. I can see there's about 800 of you tuned in. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. On tonight's show, we're going to talk about Daniel Andrews' office. Well, it's been defaced. Not for the first time, several times. And we're going to take a look into the image to try and work out whether or not we think it's legitimate or if it's perhaps photoshopped. We're also going to talk in quite extensive detail about the true survival rate of COVID-19. That's right. Or in other words, the infection fatality rate of COVID-19, not to be confused with the case fatality rate, which is based on PCR tests and other COVID tests that we speak about on the MCJ report that we know are flawed for the purpose of detecting infection. So I'm really excited to speak about that on the show tonight. I've been wanting to do it for a while. The mainstream media straight out refuses to cover this topic, infection fatality rate. Governments refuse to cover it, but we're going to cover it on the show. And we're also going to talk about our abundance of natural resources here in Australia. That's right. Our beautiful country is still an untapped goldmine. Yet when you look over the past few decades at our foreign policy and our manufacturing and industrial policy, Australia now has the economic complexity of a third world nation. Yet we're the most resource rich and resource diverse. So why do you think that might be? We're going to talk about that, and we're going to also feature a clip from Berkey. That's right. Some of you follow Berkey on TikTok. He presents excellent commentary regarding the unfolding of this madness. So that's what's in store for the show tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, give the broadcast a share it out to your networks, and let's get started, shall we? Alrighty, no, we're not starting with this grub. Alright, so MCJ Report is presented by FATV Jerky. That's fatvjerky.com.au. A wonderful Australian-owned business that produces a wonderful Australian-made product. Beef jerky, I mean, who doesn't love the product? I very much respect the owner of this business, Tony. He's a great guy, ex-Navy, learnt to make beef jerky in the Navy, and then afterwards combined his skills with a family recipe to launch his business. Tony is holding the line. He's been barred from entering markets where he usually sells his product because he refuses to be injected. That's right. So all the respect in the world to Tony. If you'd like to purchase some of these products, the website's right there, fatvjerky.com.au. You'll have a great product. You'll be supporting a great Australian business. MCJ Report gets a kickback. Everybody wins. Also, we've restocked on merchandise. That's right. So mcjreport.com/shop. We will have a new range coming out soon, but if you'd like to grab a t-shirt, represent the show, and stand alongside independent reporting and journalism, it's mcjreport.com/shop. And I'm very happy to announce that we now officially have an MCJ Report worker managing the shop and sorting out orders. So it won't be done by me. We've brought in somebody to the team, which I think is wonderful, and we hope to grow the team even further really soon. So that's mcjreport.com/shop. All right, let's get this show on the road, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? All right, now, sorry to frighten you with this image of this particular individual. I hope that didn't give you a startle. I mean, it could certainly give the best of us a bit of a fright, I think. So Daniel Andrews' office defaced again. Okay, this is not the first time it's happened, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel Andrews' office here in Victoria, the Premier of Victoria, the man who would very much like to rule over every Victorian with an iron fist, he has been on the receiving end of a series of vandalism slogans and statements spray painted onto his store, but this time we see something a little bit different where a whole bunch of signs have been put up. And the remarks are certainly not made in support of Daniel Andrews. Of course, it's quite reasonable to assume that those who are defacing his office have negative views about the man. Okay, yeah, believe it or not, there's actually some people out there that don't like Daniel Andrews. One thing we know about Andrews is that he's so arrogant that he will never listen to the critics, whether they're political opponents, but more sadly, he won't listen to the people. We've been screaming from the rooftop. That's right. Since the inception of this corona situation, Daniel Andrews does not listen. He does what he thinks is the right thing to do in terms of advancing his worldview, which I say is modeled after the worldview of the Chinese Communist Party. I think he looks up to them very much. He's seeking to change our culture and to erode our freedoms and essentially to erode what it is to be Australian. Okay, so some people don't like him. So we're going to take a look. We're going to take a closer look at this image right here, because when I'm sent an image like this, the first question I have is it legitimate or is it photoshopped? So we're going to go into a little bit of an analysis, and my position is I believe it's legitimate. But before we do, I just want to show you some other examples of the defacing of Daniel Andrews' office. So let me just start here. So here we go. We have some graffiti here. Daniel Andrews are calling for a royal commission accusing him of being responsible for over 800 deaths. Okay. We have here, sack Daniel Andrews. A pretty simple message. I think that's a fairly regular slogan here in Victoria. Okay, we've got here tyrant scum. I'm just reading off the screen here. CCP lackey and liar. Okay, so seemingly a reference to Daniel Andrews' very cozy relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, and of course his very authoritarian manner in which he governs this state. We also saw that at one point, I believe it was earlier this year, there were several small holes that appeared in the windows of Daniel Andrews' office right there. So most likely some type of small projectile fired into Daniel Andrews' office. You can see there the tape. All right, now here's the main exhibit here. So this is the most recent one that I was sent. So what we see here is no graffiti or anything like that, rather a series of placards that have been stuck to his window. So the first question I had was, is it photoshopped or is it legitimate? So I've come to the determination that I think it's legitimate. So I'll just take you through my thinking. So we look here, you see these circles that I've made. You can clearly see the shadows, which I think match up with the surroundings, and you can most definitely see a contrast in color from sign to sign, indicating to me most likely it's a legitimate photo. Also here, what you're looking at are some straight lines that I drew in red in order to demonstrate the disparity in which the signs had been put up there. So if it was photoshopped, I think you would see less attention to detail. The signs would most probably be straight, but instead here we can see there's most definitely a difference in angle from sign to sign, which indicates to me human activity. And when we zoom in really closely, we see that the pixels match from the window to the sign. So so I'm inclined to think that it's a legitimate photo. And I think what this demonstrates is that there's a great deal of frustration out there in relation to Daniel Andrews. Of course, a lot of people are losing their jobs, feeling completely voiceless, feeling that their rights have been trampled all over. But at the end of the day, I don't really think we can hold our breath. Daniel Andrews won't listen. The only solution I see is to have this man voted out of office by any means necessary, because should leaders, and believe me, when I say leader in inverted commas, should these types of characters become completely prevalent throughout our institutions, then God help us, Australia would have well and truly fallen. Next election, we've got the federal election. I'm giving my strong endorsement to UAP. I'm encouraging people to look into UAP. But if there's one thing you do, make sure that you put Labor, Liberal, Greens and the Nationals at the absolute bottom of the ballot paper, if there's one thing that you do. And we'll also be releasing a segment on MCJ Report really soon detailing how to vote, because it can be a very confusing process when there's all these parties involved. We're going to go through it, and I'll have a lot more to say on UAP really soon. You can count on that. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the segment that I've been really wanting to present for quite a while now. So, taking a closer look at the infection fatality rate of COVID-19, okay, or IFR for short. Now, the mainstream media, the government, the bureaucrats, they never bring the IFR to the attention of the public, okay, and one has to ask the question why. Okay, we've been told that we're in a global deadly pandemic, so don't you think that it would be in the public's best interest to be made aware of expert estimates on the true fatality rate of COVID-19, estimates that are based on very complex modeling? Don't you think it would be in our best interest to know this kind of stuff? Well, clearly the government doesn't think so. Clearly the government would prefer to peddle in fear. The mainstream media would prefer to reinforce that narrative of fear because it results in what? Views, clicks, more dollars for the sponsors. And of course, the pharmaceutical corporations would much prefer the peddling of fear because that helps them to flog their products all over to the world to a market of billions of people. But anyway, before we talk about IFR, I'm just gonna go through a definition with you guys to put this segment in context. This is really, really important. This is coming from nature.com, the difference between CFR, which is case fatality rate, which is based on PCR tests, and IFR, which is based on an estimate of total infections. Okay, it says here, case fatality rates can be considered defined as the number of deceased over the number of detected infections to investigate the risk patterns for COVID-19 mortality across countries. This number, however, does not account for the undetected infections and depends on the amount of testing and the testing strategy, which substantially varied across time and between countries. By contrast, estimation of the infection fatality rate, IFR, defined as the ratio of deceased versus infected, relies on estimates of the actual number of infections, including the non-detected. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense there. The sources that I plan to present to you during this segment of the show include the World Health Organization, okay, nature.com, pubmed.gov, bmcpublichealth.com, and medrxiv.org. You can look up all of these institutions right here. And as I've mentioned there, sources cited in this report are comprised of government/international bodies and highly esteemed journals, okay? So we're not using websites that just fell out of the sky, some weird domain name with a WordPress extension. We're going for sources that are internationally recognized. All right, so here's a little disclaimer before I get to the meat of the presentation. It says here, figures quoted in this report are estimates based on complex modeling published by highly educated experts and are open to further scrutiny and analysis. Figures from meta-analysis are cited in this report. Further understanding of these figures can be obtained via viewing the relevant citations. It is highly recommended to read all studies in full in order to gain a more comprehensive understanding of infection fatality rate estimates. If you'd like a copy of the sources referenced, enter your email at mcjreport.com/join. Okay, so all the documents and studies I'm about to reference, if you want a copy, mcjreport.com/join. Alrighty, now I'm going to just take you through the studies and publications and organizations that I've used for this particular segment. I'm going to just run through them, and then I'll reveal to you the infection fatality rate estimates published by each. Okay, so we're looking at the World Health Organization here. We've got PubMed, of course, a US government organization that sits above the National Library of Medicine. more specifically the National Center for Biotechnology Information. We have a couple of references from nature.com. Okay. Also, we have bmcpublichealth.com, and we have medrxiv.org. Okay, so these are the organizations, institutions, and journals that we'll be referencing. Okay, so let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take you through the estimates from each of these entities. Okay, so we've got biomedcentral.com. This was a study from a specific town in Germany, listed at the top there, which came in at 0.41%. Okay, so in other words, you're looking at a documented survival rate of 99.6% or 99.59%. All right, example number 2. The World Health Organization global estimate of IFR 1 to 0.5%, or in other terms, a 99 to 99.5% survival rate. So that's openly published by the World Health Organization. Okay. Number 3 here, again from PubMed. Okay. So a meta-analysis, I believe, from 34 geographical regions. 10 years old, infection fatality rate 0.002%, 25 years of age 0.01%, 55 years 0.4%, 65 years 1.4%, 75 years 4.6%, and of course it's important to point out that at around that age there tends to be certain comorbidities catching up with various individuals at that stage of their life. And then 85 plus 15%, which is, of course, the life expectancy. I believe the average life expectancy in Australia is around the early 80s. Now, I've put down here, figures do not account for comorbidities or sex. That's right. So it's been documented that males are generally at higher risk. All right, let's keep this moving along here. We have nature.com, 45 countries. Okay, so children 5 to 9 years old, infection fatality rate published 0.001%. Okay, so that's 99.99 fill in the blank. 80 years plus, we have 8.29%. Okay, which is lower than what we've seen here at 15%. Okay, now we have some country-specific infection fatality rates, and these are for people, both men and women, under the age of 65 years old. Okay, so Japan coming in at 1.09%, or a survival rate of 99%. We have Italy at 0.94%, France at 0.65%, Pakistan at 0.16%, and Kenya where it's nice and sunny, coming in at 0.09%. Okay, now again, these figures do not account for comorbidities or gender. All right, now it's also important to point out that those people who passed away, whose deaths were attributed to COVID-19, it's often quite a grey area, and often we don't know exactly the chain of events that led up to a certain individual's death, especially when taking into consideration the fairly loose death reporting guidelines for COVID as stated by the World Health Organization. All right, again, we have nature.com. Now, this is specifically in relation to 65-year-old women. Norway, we have 0.004% infection fatality rate. Denmark, 0.009%. Germany, 0.013%. Scotland, 0.085%. Belgium, 0.09%. England and Wales, 0.092%. United States, 0.102%. Okay, so we have that's the risk of dying. Okay, the estimated infection fatality rate, and as it states down the bottom here, these figures do not account for comorbidities. All right, now finally here we have the publication from medrxiv.com, over 32 locations, all ages, the published estimated risk of dying from COVID here, 0.27%, or if we're looking at only people younger than 70 years of age, it comes in here at 0.05%. Okay, so that's like 99.95 survival, I believe, if you were to convert it to a survival rate. We have here, figures do not account for comorbidities or sex. That's right. So that's that particular study right there. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you found that particular segment interesting, and I think it's very important to try and put this situation into context. Let me ask you the question at home. Are you familiar with some of these studies that I've cited? If you are, have you seen these studies referenced on the mainstream media? Have you seen governments speak about these studies, or people to the likes of Daniel Andrews? Now, I suppose that's a little bit of a rhetorical question, because I know the answer, and I know that governments have not been speaking about these particular studies, and they, as far as I'm concerned, have never even mentioned anything about the infection fatality rate of this supposedly novel coronavirus. Now, why won't government and MSN address these studies? Why do you think that could possibly be? Okay, so whenever I'm faced with a situation that doesn't make sense, I think to myself, there must be something not being said. There must be some type of agenda at play. I don't know what the agenda is. I'm not really here to speculate too much. So what I do is I look at who stands to benefit the most from suppression of perfectly legitimate expert information, okay, information published by international bodies, government bodies, and well-esteemed journals. Who stands to benefit? Well, politically speaking, we see leaders around the world who have been able to consolidate an extraordinary amount of executive power in their hands under the guise of keeping everybody safe from an allegedly very deadly virus. We've seen the pharmaceutical corporations and the tech corporations rake in profits to the likes of which they have never seen before. Okay, and we also see what I would describe as a greater consolidation of power and influence in certain global multilateral institutions, such as the United Nations, but I suppose in this instance, more specifically, the World Health Organization, due to all the lockdowns and policy which has been, I suppose, justified by the government in response to keeping us safe. Well, at least that's what the government likes to try and convince us of. We've also seen a tremendous transfer of wealth. That's right, a tremendous transfer of wealth from the middle working class to the absolute upper echelon of society in terms of the big corporations, and of course power has been transferred as well from the working class into the hands of politicians, most of whom would sell us out in exchange for simply preserving and advancing their own career. So that's my presentation. If you would like me to send you each of these studies so you can read through them more thoroughly in your own time, go to mcjreport.com/join, put your email address in. I'll send them all to you. I think it's important to understand at least the basics of the modeling so you can gain a more comprehensive understanding of where exactly these figures came from. And it's also important to point out that I have cited various meta-analysis, and these particular studies reference several other studies which are in the citations of the studies of which I'll send to you should you want a copy. All right, so that just about wraps it up for this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to keep this rolling along here. Alrighty, so Australia is still an untapped gold mine. So who here knows what I'm talking about? Australia is still an untapped gold mine. Now, when we look at Australia, we're in a very unique position. We have one of the largest countries in the world in terms of land mass. We have one of the least densely populated countries in the world in terms of people per square kilometre. But we have probably the most diverse reserves of resources in the world in such extraordinary amounts. Okay, now anybody would think with the resource diversity that we have in our country, Australia should be absolutely one of the top nations in the world in terms of economy, military, industrialization, and economic complexity. That's what one would think. It's not as if we're stupid people. There's a lot of smart Australians in this country. So the question remains, how come we in Australia, we're not at one of these top positions? Some people may blame it on our relatively small population. Okay, maybe that has something to play with it, or is somewhat indicative of our position on the world stage. But I would argue that we are where we are due to decades worth of government that time and time again have implemented foreign policy and trade policy that has routinely put Australian creators, inventors, and innovators to the side, whilst propping up the big multinational corporations, selling out our industries to foreign interests, inviting foreign interest in to purchase huge amounts of our country, including but not limited to our sovereign assets, our strategic assets such as ports, mining rights, real estate, and also many of our large corporations. Several have been in, say, dairy, wine production, copper refinery, I believe, and much more. So why exactly is this? Why have Australian politicians and governments over the past few decades, why have they not incentivized Australian innovation and Australian ingenuity and Australian entrepreneurship and Australian exports? Why have they not incentivized that? What we see instead is a model by the government where they make foreign policy, trade policy, and they sell our country out to the highest bidder. And at the end of the financial year, the Liberal Party will show their books to the public and say, look how smart we are. We made a great profit. We balanced the budget. Well, balance the budget at the expense of what? Selling off parts of our country. We saw the selling off of Keswick Island, the Port of Darwin. Here in Melbourne, we saw the selling off of the Port of Melbourne, of course, to a consortium, a Chinese-backed company owning a reasonable share in that particular organization. And what are we left with in the end? We're left with high taxes for business. We're left with an abundance of red tape. We're left with restrictions on exporters and the absolute crippling of Australian business and the restriction of Australian creativity that is so often beaten down with taxes, red tape, and useless government policy. Okay? And that's why I believe we're in the position that we're in, whereby our country, Australia, which should be one of the top countries in the world for industry, where are we ranked in terms of economic complexity? I don't even want to think about it. I believe off the top of my head, it's between 50 and 60, or around 55. The economic complexity of our nation resembles that of a third world country. There's third world nations out there that have greater manufacturing and industrial diversity than what we do in Australia. What has our government been doing this entire time? Selling us out, okay, digging raw resources out of the ground, not bothering to refine those resources or using a tremendous deal of them at home, simply loading those resources onto ships and sending them to other nations, some of which one day may very well become a very dangerous enemy of Australia. Okay, I think that's not hard to imagine when we look at the expansionist strategy of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, so what do we need to change this in our country? I think we need a complete paradigm shift. We need people to think big. Okay, we need huge tax cuts on local business, especially innovative businesses, advanced manufacturing, and Australian exporters. And most definitely some major adjustments to our foreign and trade policy. Labor and Liberal, they cannot get it right. They do not have the solution to this issue. They are the problem, not the solution. Now, to put what I'm saying in perspective, I have a series of reserves here that I'm going to run through with you in terms of our resources here in Australia to really paint a picture how how much of an opportunity we have on our hands and the extent to which that opportunity is being wasted by self-serving politicians, many of whom do not love this country. All right, so check this out. I'm going to run through it with you. Have a look at this. Alrighty, where are we? Okay, so profiling the top 5 largest iron ore producing countries from NS Energy. Australia coming in at number 1 for the world's largest iron ore producing country. And it's important to point out this is usable iron ore. There are other countries out there that maybe have larger reserves or produce more, but we're only interested in iron ore that is of high value here. So Australia coming in at number 1. Uranium, okay, coming from the World Nuclear Association. Australia's uranium resource, as it says here, are the world's largest, almost 1/3 of the world total. Now just imagine, instead of shipping all this uranium off on ships, imagine we used it for our own energy production. Imagine the tremendous amount of money that Australian producers, manufacturers and industry could save if they had access to cheap, reliable energy that, by the way, is environmentally friendly. Instead, what do? We ship it on boats and we send it overseas. A lot of it goes to Japan. All right. Coal reserves, we have Australia coming in here in position number 2. Natural gas, Australia coming in at 27th. Lithium reserves, Australia coming in at number 5. Okay, so lithium very important for batteries, electric vehicles, but also a lot of emerging industries that will ultimately take us into the future. Copper reserves, we have Australia coming in at number 3. Rare earth elements used in a lot of advanced manufacturing, robotics, electric cars, basically the industries of tomorrow. Australia coming in at position number 6, which is really quite competitive given the global appetite for these resources. Oil reserves here, okay, something Australia is not known for, but nonetheless coming in at position number 34. Gold, Australia coming in at position number 1. Zinc, Australia coming in at position number 1. Lead, Australia coming in again at position number 1. And if you'd like more information on our resources and where we stack up in the world, again, mcjreport.com/join. I'll send you the email tomorrow, and I'll also send you this document here from the government, Geoscience Australia, detailing commodities and where in the world we stand in relation to these commodities. So basically what I'm trying to put into perspective here is that we're so incredibly lucky, blessed, fortunate to have access to this diversity of resources more than any country really needs. We should be incentivizing innovation and upping our position on the global stage, but instead our politicians are holding us back, selling us out, and stripping away our freedoms. Now, let me add in that everything I've just mentioned on this report in terms of our resources, it all means nothing if we don't have freedom, by the way. It doesn't matter how bad the trade policies are or our foreign policy. If we are not free to live as free Australians, which is our God-given right, then the government may as well sell us out and go all the way. So just to put it in perspective, there's a lot worth fighting for in this country. We must seek to reacquire our bodily integrity, our dignity, our freedom. But at the same time, I think we can all agree that we'd love to see a major shift in our policy, the bolstering of local business, and the advancement of Australia on the world stage. So should I enter into politics? This is most definitely something I'll be speaking about a lot. I want to see Australia with a huge economy. I'd love to see us here in Australia. I would love to see the mass cultivation of otherwise barren lands, say New South Wales, Queensland. I think it's an absolute disgrace what our government has done with our water over the years. It's true that Australia is a dry country, okay? But if you look at, say, far north Queensland, you're looking at one of the wettest places on earth. Some of you may recall the Bradfield scheme that never went ahead. I think it's vital and urgent to work out some type of water recycling program, because our land itself is absolutely priceless. If we were to cultivate otherwise barren lands in our country, here in Australia, we could position ourselves as a primary supplier to booming overseas populations. We have booming populations on the doorstep of Australia. They're booming due to industrialization. We think about countries throughout South Asia, West Asia, and even moving towards Africa. Ideally, we would love to be exporting all the excess food that certain nations need, and it could be done, but our government lacks the foresight. You see, the technology exists. It certainly exists. You look at a country like Israel, for example. Israel is essentially barren, yet they have farms, they produce everything they need. The technology is out there, and I say that it is absolutely worth the investment. It's an investment in the future, an investment in our jobs, Australian business, and it's an investment in our sovereignty, as opposed to what the Australian government of the day loves to do, which is what? Privatizing our foreign assets, selling them out to foreign interests, and then patting themselves on the back and saying, hey, look at all this money we made. It's an absolute disgrace, and something must be done about it. That's why I'm joining UAP. All right, so that wraps it up for that particular segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Now, got a bit of a message here from Berkey. That's right. Some of you know who this individual is. I absolutely love his work. It's Aussie65 Larrikin on TikTok, and he's providing daily commentary, shining a light on the lunacy that has unfolded in front of our eyes. This time in regards to what appears to be some type of air patrol. Check this out.
Here we go again. So here's another regular occurrence. There are army helicopters over Campbelltown. I will tell you now. If we saw that once a year, we'd go, wow, how cool is that? Army helicopters. Yeah, right. But this is a regular. Listen to how noisy that shit is. A regular occurrence. Yeah. Pretty sure there's something else at play here. I don't like the sound of it either. Yeah, we're real free. And don't go telling me that they're just doing a little flyby, doing some training, because that's utter.
So what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Unfortunately, I think these types of scenes are going to become more and more common in our country moving forward. We of course see the militarization of our police, the consolidation of power within state governments, the federal government. This has all been done before, by the way, so what we're experiencing right now is nothing different to other events that took place throughout history. You can do a bit of reading. Venezuela is an interesting case story when we see the transition from a free market economy to a socialist system, which really kicked off around the year 2000 and became progressively worse. Okay, especially considering that in the case of Venezuela, they're an oil-based economy. So when the price of oil crashed, guess what else crashed? All the socialist programs. When the government provides everything for the people, the government is also capable of taking everything to the people. You look at Venezuela now, 20 years later, it's an absolute nightmare. And every authoritarian takeover essentially starts the same way. Okay, so whether you're looking at Venezuela, whether you're looking at Cambodia, Iran, even China, even Nazi Germany, we see a lot of consistencies. The first two rights, in my view, that the government comes for, the right to free speech and dissent, freedom of the press, and the right to bear arms. So you'll notice with every authoritarian takeover, they shut down free speech. Those who express dissent are jailed or investigated. We saw a report at the start of the show that supposedly a mayor is under investigation for criticizing the vaccine rollout. But of course, seizing firearms is a very big part of any good old-fashioned authoritarian takeover. Why do they do this? It's to, of course, suppress opposition. Okay, perhaps the two greatest weapons that humans have in this world, I would say their voice and their capability to fight back in the face of a hostile force. Okay, now when the hostile force comes in the shape of government and people are left without both their words or weapons to fight back, then what happens to the people? What happens? History tells us they become slaves and are essentially left at the behest of the government. We look at Cuba, the communist takeover of Cuba, whereby citizens were jailed and executed based on what the regime referred to as revolutionary conviction. So forget about the fair trial, forget about a fair judge, forget about having any type of representation. The regime doesn't need any of that because they know what's right and you don't know what's right. At least that's what they'd like to have you believe. Now, I think we're seeing some similar situations here in Australia. We've seen some Supreme Court and High Court challenges that many legal experts would argue held merit. We've seen them struck down, pushed to the side, and rejected both at the Supreme Court and the High Court, despite the abundance of supporting evidence. Okay, so that raises some questions in relation to the state of the judiciary in our country. Okay, we see Daniel Andrews and IBAC, and we've seen him under review from other committees in the past. Many of us considered those appearances to be nothing more than a theatrical performance. So the question is, where is this all going? We also see our speech silenced here. Online, for instance, big tech loves to deplatform people who dare to expose the truth about many of the lies that have been committed since the inception of this corona situation. And so what do we do then? What is another way that we can make our voices heard? Protest, which is a human right. What happens when we protest? We get arrested, beaten down, and some of us are left with some very bad injuries and traumatic memories that will last a lifetime. Okay? And the government is destroying our industries, preventing people from working, okay? Not just in relation to the jab, but of course all the job mandates, forcing people into government dependency, JobKeeper, okay? Kind of resembles universal basic income, which is of course a socialist initiative to have the people of the land eating out of the palm of government. Businesses shut down that will never reopen. So what do these people do that have lost their businesses? They look for work with the government, which has been ever expanding. The only real income growth and job growth we've seen for a long time is in the public sector, not the private sector. The private sector feeds the public sector. The government loves to bleed the private sector dry. And now we're left with a huge government that has all this power and a population that is suffering greatly. The erosion of our rights. I mean, who here thought that John Howard was truly doing a good thing when he did what he did back in 1996? Maybe a lot of us did, okay? 96, I'm trying to think, how old was I? That was my last year of primary school, 96. So of course, being young, you have limited views. But growing up, I thought, oh, Johnny Howard, he did a good thing. Until I really started exploring this topic a lot further. And I made a detailed effort to understand what type of relationship exists for a lawful, well-to-do armed population versus a lawful non-armed population that have similar financial metrics. And what I learned is that I don't believe any type of relationship, any causative relationship has ever been established between lawful firearm ownership for self-defense and an increase in homicide. And I'm happy to detail that on the show for you guys. I believe we've been lied to about this particular fact, and I think in Australia we're really beginning to pay the price for many of our freedoms that we gave up. Okay, we gave up. Johnny Howard came and said, citizens not good, government is more responsible and more mature, so we're going to take your guns. And essentially we rolled over. Okay, now what do we see now? We see the absolute misuse of firearms, not by citizens, but by the police. Look at Victoria Police using firearms to fire off what they refer to as non-lethal rounds into unarmed protesters who never have any chance of fighting back. Now, let me ask you another question, since we're on the topic. The greatest atrocities and misuse of firearms throughout history, have they been committed by citizens or have they been committed by governments? The greatest crimes against humanity, committed by citizens or committed by governments? Freedom is the only way, in my opinion, for us to ever get back any form of dignity, self-respect, and to live what it is to be Australian. The government, and I read that freedom is not a natural state because humans in power always seek more power. And as the old saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what I believe we're seeing with Daniel Andrews, Mark McGowan, many leaders across the world who are really, like Daniel Andrews, he's really nothing more in global terms, he's nothing more than some like middle-level manager on a power trip. But of course his power has been exacerbated and he's becoming more ruthless, more belligerent, more willing to punch down, insult, and perpetuate a two-tier society that is essentially led under his iron rule. But you look at the man, he's just an absolute grub, and you think to yourself, how did we get here? So freedom's not a natural state, then therefore freedom must continuously be fought for. That's your responsibility. That's my responsibility. That's our responsibility and civic duty that we have to one another as Australians. Okay, it's a responsibility we have to the future generations of our country, and it's also, in my opinion, integral to upholding the dignity of Australians that worked hard, fought and died, those that came before us, who are responsible for giving us the opportunities we have as Australians. So I guess where I'm leading with this rant is don't give up, all right? I know that times seem really difficult, but you look at the leaders throughout our country, they're absolute grubs. Don't take orders from them, okay? These people are the worst of the worst. They're not patriotic. They don't love this country and they don't love you. We need to hold the line. Even if you've gone out and gotten the jab due to coercion, my message to you is still you need to hold the line. Do you really want to submit yourself and your family to a system whereby your very small amount of freedoms are dependent upon whether or not you inject some pharmaceutical product into your body? Okay, whilst the shareholders of the pharmaceutical corporations piss themselves laughing because they can't believe how lucky they got, and whilst the political powers to be continuously hold freedom over your head subject to an injection or subject to some other outlandish demand. I don't think you do. So even if you've taken the jab, like, don't think that, oh, it's over for you, you gave up. Please don't think like that. The fight has just begun. You need to fight to make sure that this rubbish doesn't continue. I'm going to fight, you're going to fight. And at the end of the day, we the people are so much stronger. We have an infinite amount of strength, so much greater than the very vast majority of these traitorous, unpatriotic grubs that work within our parliaments and bureaucracies, okay? They're weak people. They resemble nothing of the Australian spirit. And it's our job to kick them out of parliament by any means necessary. I know that we haven't been a very politically minded country for a long time. A lot of us were more concerned about footy, whatever, but You know what? Stuff it. Stuff the AFL. Stuff the NRL. Honestly, at the end of the day, who cares? Who gives a damn about sport if we're not free? Okay? I mean, it's just so irrelevant. Next election, if there's one thing you do, vote wisely. Put Labor, Liberals, Nationals and the Greens at the bottom of the ballot paper. That's where they belong, at the bottom. They also belong in the bin, but hey, you can't have everything. And vote for a minor party and use your preferences very, very wisely. We're going to do a video on how to do that. In my honest opinion, the next election that we have is, I don't mean to sound like I'm exaggerating or anything like that, but I honestly believe that the next election could be the last chance we have to redirect the course of history for our country. And that's it for my big rant. So thank you for listening. Thank you very much for listening. That just about brings us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Now, just one small thing. Of course, I'll just give another plug to our great partner, fatvjerky.com.au. Great product. I wouldn't promote it if I didn't consume it myself. Great guy, Tony. I respect him a lot. Ex-Navy, terrific guy. MCJ at checkout for 10% off. Or if you'd like to grab a t-shirt, support the show, stand alongside our mission here. I have a new team member, that's right. His task is to manage the store, manage orders. It's great to have somebody on the team. mcjreport.com/shop. Free shipping Australia-wide. International shipping costs apply. And that just about wraps us up for the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening to me for that 10-15 minute rant about some of my grievances. But I think we all share these views, right? We all share these views. We want Australia to be big and powerful. We want to have a big, powerful military and to be a net exporter of our Australian innovative products. We want to refine our own resources, use our own resources instead of shipping them off in their raw form to all these other countries that are able to capitalize many times over off what is a tremendous gift in terms of our resource diversity. And but most importantly, we need to be free, which means that we need to kick out these politicians. Many of them are from a long line of politicians. Father was a politician. A lot of these people have never been in the real world, just went straight from academia, straight into politics, and they think they know about workers. I mean, what an absolute disgrace. I was speaking to one gentleman the other day. He's from the flower farming industry. Sorry, I should have put that on silent. He told me about a policy that went through under Julia Gillard, which removed a series of tariffs from South America. And overnight, the flower growing industry in Australia was decimated. All of a sudden, we had these cheap imports being flown over by air freight, not by sea freight, to get it here quickly. And even given the cost of air freight, Australian flower farmers were so tremendously undermined cost-wise. Most of them were priced out of the industry, apart from a few. So, I mean, isn't there supposed to be anti-dumping laws with the World Trade Organization, of which Australia is a member? When is anti-dumping considered and when is it not? So there's just a lot of inconsistencies and there's so much that needs to be fixed up, and that's why I'm throwing my hat in the ring and I'm saying, hey, I'm willing to go and run for Parliament. Now, of course, that is subject to my candidacy approval with UAP, so I'll keep you up to date with that. But anyway, I see a lot of familiar names. There's Sharon. Sharon, it's great to see you here. It's always lovely to see you on every episode. Sharon and I, we met in person, that's right. So there you go. And I'm sure that I've met some of you there as well. There's Robin. Cyber Mike says, great rant. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that. There's Just a Mum. There's DW Seeker. I was looking for you, our American friend. It's always a pleasure to have you here. You know, Australians and Americans, we're like brothers and sisters. We really truly are. We have such a rich history of friendship and cooperation together, and that's why Americans and Australians have always gotten along, because we share so much in common, don't we? And it's lovely. What else do we have here? Dana says that I did a great job. Thank you. I really appreciate that. There's whatevers there again. So typical question, and you know, I asked this question because I get around to doing MCJ Report. I've been preparing for the show, obviously, for hours, and it's dinner time, and I'm always hungry. So I like to ask you guys, what's on for dinner tonight? And I live vicariously through your comments, telling me what you ate for dinner, and it sort of gets me through in a way. So I always love hearing about what dinner you guys have prepared. Let's see. So there's Kim there saying, "Hold strong, everyone." That get used to not being on Facebook. Well, that's what we're trying to do here. So for sure, like in terms of views and reach, MCJ Report has taken a bit of a hit going on to Rumble. But the reason I'm doing it is because I'm seeking long term. My thinking is completely long term. I want to build up a truly self-sufficient, self-standing, independent media platform. And I'm in negotiations for a new website, so you'll be able to either watch on Rumble or the new website. I'll probably remove the YouTube broadcast. Right now we are live on YouTube as well. But I'll probably scrap that and do it solely through Rumble and mcjreport.com. And the remodeling for mcjreport.com will resemble an interface similar to Rumble. Okay, there'll be an app. I'm in the process of getting quoted on app development. You'll receive a notification, right? So you'll download the MCJ Report app. When it hits 8 p.m., you'll get a little ding on your phone. MCJ Report is live, and then you can jump on and watch. And I think that's great. I think that's what we need, right? Purple says, is anyone here from Brisbane? Who's from Brisbane? There's Zarina there saying barbecue pork kebabs with broccoli, carrots, and mash. Okay, that sounds awesome. That sounds pretty tasty to me. DW Seeker had a Tim Tam for a snack. All right, I guess a Tim Tam is always a good thing. Fraser Coast, Telegram notifications. Yeah, make sure that you've got your Telegram notifications turned on, and that way you'll make sure that you don't miss an episode. Another thing that I want to speak about. A lot of people have been coerced into taking the vaccine. And of course, people that sustained major vaccine injuries, they're not given a voice through the mainstream media. So I'm putting a call out there. Anyone who has sustained a serious vaccine injury who wants to talk about it, send me an email, mcjreport@protonmail.com. And I'm happy to give a vaccine injured person a voice through this platform. Cyber Mike says lemon chicken and rice. Oh, that sounds pretty good. That sounds actually very delicious. We've got beans on toast. We've got some creativity. Daniel is from Canberra. How you going, my friend? Reporting live from the Victorian Socialist Republic, I suppose you could say. Just having a read through here. Whatever says you'd bring me some spud if I was closer. Thank you. That's kind of you to say that. I appreciate it. What else do we have here? Van Presta says I'm seeking quality followers. Well, yeah, I think we want to use our brains, right? The mainstream media is mass production for mass consumption. We want to grow MCJ Report a lot bigger, and of course, a huge priority for this show is we ask questions, and when we see there's information, as in verified information that is purposefully not being reported on, we need to ask why, we need to talk about it, and then speculate on why that might be. That's what we do. That's what we do. Sharon says that you hate this place now. Well, The leadership I agree with, but the place, I mean, we love Victoria, right? But unfortunately, the people running Victoria have made Victoria a very bad place. So I see where you're coming from. We got Yucky Man. That's an interesting username. Eggplant and halloumi burgers. Okay, that sounds delicious. Let's see, what else do we have here? You just ordered some beef jerky. Awesome, Zarina. I know that you'll be satisfied. There's so many great flavors. I like the barbecue flavor, but there's one particular flavor that is called the Gringo Killer, and it's like incredibly hot. And I like to think I can handle my spicy foods, but the Gringo Killer, it really messed me up. So just a warning: if you order the Gringo Killer from FATV Jerky, it's insane. So maybe some people can handle it. For me, I can't. Let's see. LHEN. Lena, is it from Brisbane? Saying that I give you hope. Well, thank you very much. And I mean, I do this because I believe in you. Ultimately, I believe in the people of our country. I believe in our country. By no stretch of the imagination have I given up on Australia. So I do what I do because I believe in us. And that's what it's all about. It's all about us. I may be maybe like a bit of a spokesperson because I run MCJ Report, but we're all just in this doing what we can in our capacity. So, you know, we're just all Aussies. We're all the same. That's the way I see it. Truth Seeker says, great jerky. You've seen him at one of the few beer festivals. Oh, awesome. Well, unfortunately, at these festivals and markets, they're now barring these great Aussie businesses. I mean, what a slap in the face. You know, great Australian business. No, you can't come here. It's just absolutely disgusting. Let's see, what else do we have? What else? Just reading some comments here. We have an awesome community, we do. And no matter where you are in Australia, by the way, there's most likely an RDA active group in your area. So if you want to get to know like-minded people, share resources, Monica through RDA is just every day. It's incredible, releasing resources that can help people. We've seen some people as a result have gained access to COVID-19 vaccine exemptions, which I know is very hard to get. And it's reignitedemocracyaustralia.com.au. You can find a group near you. Oh, by the way, there's a protest plan for next month in Melbourne, a freedom rally. But guess what? There's a counter-protest planned as well. So you've got some group who are claiming to be anti-fascist, going after people who are standing against big government control, and standing up for freedom. It's absolutely absurd. Fascism can really be defined by big government overreaching, an authoritarian government, a government that implements policy with no regards for human rights, with the sole intention of advancing the objectives of the state, and those that facilitate the advancement of those objectives can be reasonably described as fascists. So how on earth, there's people out there calling us fascists, literally standing against big government, standing up for freedom, bodily integrity, standing against the big pharmaceutical corporations, and we're the far right, it's just, it makes me laugh. Honestly, it makes me laugh, and I think it's pathetic. But anyway, I don't really have much more to say about that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap it up. MCJ Report will be back tomorrow night, MCJ Report 122. We're going to have a guest on the show, somebody that you know really well, someone who I love having on the show. His name is Anthony Lev, a good mate of mine, a staunch advocate for freedom. So you'll have Anthony on the show tomorrow. You'll have me. It's going to be great. Stay strong. Hang in there. Hold the line. Keep fighting. I'll see you soon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. Good evening.